November 1938. 2 days later is a very important meeting which is ordered by Hitler, Goering, but Hitler does not attend because that is, you don't do it. Oh, he didn't do such things, but it is chaired by Goering, and the interesting thing is that we have the stenographic protocol of this. Several pages are missing, but it is a lengthy protocol, and it was a meeting which started on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock and lasted until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And there are a lot of interesting things, but at a certain moment, towards the end of the discussion, Goering has an exchange with Heydrich, and we take the English translation, and Heydrich says, something is missing here. Okay. Goering asked the following, they speak about the impoverishment of the Jews, especially in the little towns and so on, and therefore there is internal migration in Germany from the little places, the villages, to the main cities, and Jews are clunging together, right? So Goering says at a certain moment, but dear Heydrich, you cannot avoid that to a large extent ghettos in the cities will emerge. You can translate this German into 2 ways, but if you understand the spirit of what Goering is saying is that in his ghettos zu kommen is they will emerge, because ghettos are now, and I'll come back to it, in this case, you see something else. You say there will be densely populated Jewish neighborhoods. Now, Heydrich says the following: as for the matter of ghettos, I would like to make my position clear right away. From a police point of view, I think that a ghetto, in the form of and now he gives a definition, in the form of a completely segregated district with only Jews, is not possible. We would have no control over a ghetto where the Jew gets together with the whole of his Jewish tribe. It would be a permanent hideout for criminals, but first of all a source of epidemics and the like. The situation today is that the German population, which lives together with Jews, forces the Jews to behave more carefully in the streets and the houses. The control of the Jews by the watchful eyes of the whole population is better than putting thousands upon thousands of Jews together in a single district of a city where uniformed officials will be unable to check on their daily activities. So is he in favor or against ghettos? Against. Now, interestingly, in February 1937, that is almost 2 years, or let's say a year and 8 months earlier, there is some exchange between him and Goebbels, not Goebbels, Hess, deputy of the Führer, and there Heydrich urges the enactment of a decree banning Jews from vacation places and cafes and so on, and says that will help in ghettoizing the Jews. So in February 37, he's in favor, but if you think about it, ghettoizing then is socially separating the Jews. Now he says something different. Right? He says there are these densely populated neighborhoods. I don't want them in Germany. So the big question is why? It's a good moment for a break. Like with TV series, now we'll come back. We are back. So, and I left you with the question. So what happened when we have what they find in the 1930s that the metaphoric use of the term ghetto, right, in German Jewish discourse, which is then observed by Nazi officials, and suddenly we find this. Now, I promised you to tell you that the input of my wife. So, it was some 9 years ago, some Saturday evening, we were jogging, and I was contemplating and telling her about this, and she asked me a certain question, and then I said, well, I have a book, and in my library, this book, and here comes to my personal introduction, was bought by my father in the 1980s in some antiquariat in Amsterdam. He was also a Holocaust scholar and so on. This book was published in September 1938 by an academic, by Peter Heinz Seraphim, who was considered to be the academic expert on Eastern European Jews, on the Ostjuden, Eastern European Jews. Academia is also a field of politics, right? No. Well, was it President Wilson who said that when he ran for the presidency, that asked him, why are you doing it? He said, I've had enough of politics, right? He was at the university before. So. But in Nazi academia, a new field of research was opened, and that was Judenforschung. That is research on Jews. There was also not, it was Ostforschung, which about Eastern Europe, and Westforschung, or Western Europe, Judenforschung, and Peter Heinz Seraphim was actually the leading scholar on in the field of Judenforschung in Eastern Europe. And in September 1938, he published a book, 800 pages, where he, if you go to the bibliography, you see he read Emanuel Ringelblum, who will be quite well known afterwards as the person who established the secret archive in the Warsaw Ghetto, and Balaban, and a lot of Jewish Eastern European scholars who would work on Polish and Eastern European Jewry in general. Now this book is interesting. So that's Judentum in Osteuropäischen Raum. That is Jewry in the Eastern European space. It's the precise word I was better translating into English as territories, in Eastern European territories. He was at that time still a doctor, but then became a professor. You know, in the European system, a professor is more than a doctor. Not like in America, right? But, so you have, if you have a chair and your head, you're almost almighty if you're a professor. So he later on became a professor. But the interesting thing is that this very copy that my father bought was the copy with this imprint, this stamp on it, and you can see Amt des Generalgouverneurs für die besetzten polnischen Gebiete, Bücherei, that is the library of the office of the General Government for the occupied Polish territories. That was Hans Frank. So this book is from the library of Hans Frank, who was the General Governor in Poland. What? That is his title, General Governor. Generalgouverneur. Well, in German there's the Generalgouverneur. That was his position. But anyhow, okay, so he started to officiate on the 25th of October 1939, and he got this chunk of central Poland, and you can imagine that when he went to Poland, he took with him a basic library, dictionary, Polish, German, German-Polish, atlases, basic legal books. And number 371 of this library was Peter Heinz Seraphim. So you can see that the book was used. Sometimes this is a better documentation, right? If you have this stamp, otherwise you can only assume that it was used. Now you can prove it. And in this book, which deals with a lot of aspects of Jewry in Eastern Europe, there is a chapter about urbanization of the Jews. And here you have a map of the most important Jewish cities in Poland in 1931, then the biggest Jewish cities in Eastern Europe, and the Warsaw Ghetto in 1938. So you see there was a ghetto in Warsaw before the occupation of the Germans, by the Germans. So, and...
But that's a German map.
Yeah, definitely.
Not a Polish map.
No, no, but I'll come back to it, right? I gave a hint before, but I'll show. So here you have the Krakow ghetto, and in Lemberg, Lviv, whatever, Vilna, Lodz, Kovno, Riga. Okay, so what you can see is that Peter Heinz Seraphim, who read the discourse of the Jews in the interwar period in Poland, and there's a lot of discussion in Jewish newspapers, in Yiddish and Polish Jewish newspaper, about improving the situation of the Jews, the economic situation, getting them out of the ghettos, of the poor, densely populated poor Jewish neighborhoods. Right? So the term was used in the physical way, right? Not a metaphoric way, by Jews, the Eastern European Jewish discourse. Now, Seraphim had read it. Seraphim and some others were in close contact with the SS. Now we can understand why Heinrich, in this meeting after Kristallnacht, suddenly said, no, I don't want a ghetto. This kind of ghettos I don't want to have in Germany. Now, in this chapter on urbanization, he has several pages on ghettos, and the most important paragraph is this one, where I say the ghetto is the same also the basis from which the Jewish expansion originates. From here do the population surplus and social misery drive the Jews into the non-Jewish branches of the economic and cultural life of the host countries. In the ghetto, the threads of not only the Jewish economic life, but also of the entire urban infrastructure are interwoven. Here do the merchants settle, starting with the peddlers and the rag dealers and ending up with the middle class, big and export merchants. From here does the proletariat Jewish artisan makes his way to the factory. Here are the religious and political Jewish leaders fostered. Here is the Jewish essence, in specific correlates, found in Eastern Europe, shape, in order to exert from here, from the business centers, influence on the surrounding and on the nations among whom the Jews live. So now comes this academic, this Nazi academic, right? Does a lot of academic work, but interprets it in an anti-Semitic way, right? So from here, the Jews leave, from here is the essence of the Jewish spirit fostered, and then the Jews sneak out to the other neighborhoods and other places and other layers of society, right? So this is the source of the Jewish threat. That is what he says. Now, this book was used by the SS experts on Jewish affairs, and therefore you can see the sudden change in the understanding of Heinrich of what a ghetto is. He doesn't want this kind of ghetto in Germany. Now, a concise version of this book was published. Here are some pictures also about the Jewish world in the ghetto. You can see pictures from Poland, of course. And here are Jews going to a slaughterhouse in Vilna, but also the ghetto in Paris, the Jewish neighborhood in Paris. That is Eastern European migrants that settled down in the center of Paris. Some of you may know the Plateau and this area in Paris. So, but a concise version of Serafi's book was published in a booklet which was edited by Hinkel, a person in charge of culture, of Jewish cultural life, and it was disseminated among soldiers, this booklet, and so on. So now we come to 1939, the invasion of Poland. So we see in February 1937, Heidegger was in favor of metaphoric ghettos, or ghettoization. In November 1938, he is strongly against ghettos, he doesn't want ghettos. But when they enter Poland, there are ghettos, as we have seen. There are ghettos. And the question is what to do with them. Now, if we now read this document that I said everybody is relating to as if it is the founding document for the ghettos, right? That is this Schnellbrief of the 21st of September 1939, what we can see is that the following is written there. There is a chapter or part, there are 4 parts in this quite long letter, which is not really a telegram, and I'm sure that it was written before the meeting and so on, but it has other goals, but there's a whole chapter about the Council of Jewish Elders. There is no chapter about ghettos. So there is no order. There is an order to establish Jewish councils, but there is no order to establish ghettos. Where do we find the term ghetto? In paragraph 5 in the chapter on the Jewish councils, where it says, so the Council of Elders and concentration centers are to be, so there is one issue, concentration centers, right, are to be made responsible for the appropriate housing of the Jews arriving from the countryside. For reasons of general police security, concentration of the Jews in the cities will probably call for regulation in the cities. We will forbid their entry to certain quarters completely. That is, for instance, the quarters where the Germans live. And that, but with due regard for economic requirements, they may, for instance, not leave the ghetto. So there is no order. And here is where Bauer in his book says, this is the order to establish the ghetto. But it isn't written there. But if we understand that the ghetto was the densely populated, poor Jewish neighborhood, so Jews will be forbidden to enter certain parts of the city, but they can live in other parts. But there's also this neighborhood, and maybe that at certain places, it is up to the local commanders to decide, right, if they will not be allowed to leave their homes. So we can see that there had to be no order to establish ghettos, because there were ghettos. And now we see a local process of commanders having to deal with the presence of Jews in certain places throughout Poland. This is now less important. So, because there is no central order, and because it is a local decision, as Browning had already observed in the 1980s, what we can see is that the idea of having Jews restricted to certain Jewish neighborhoods, which were already formerly Jewish neighborhoods, that is up to the local commanders, and therefore they pop up here and there, the ghettos. First one being in Piotrków Trybunalski, right? Not in Warsaw, not in some other place. And then other people, because the commanders are informing each other throughout Poland, right? Others are saying, okay, we'll do also something here. So there is no logic development which you can see during the first month in Poland. And by the way, something which I did not say in the beginning when I talked about the problems that we encountered when we started with this issue of the encyclopedia is that also what we always find in the historiography that people say the Germans invaded Poland and they started to establish ghettos. Now in the end what we found there were 1,140 ghettos and only about 40 of them were established during the first year and a half after the invasion. So the majority, the big majority of the ghetto was established as from the spring of 1941 onwards, both in Poland and the Soviet Union and other places. So there are many places in Poland where there were no ghettos in the beginning and also later on where there were never ghettos. So it is not a systematic issue, but commanders are copying from each other because they have to deal with local situations. He did an interesting thing. He restricted the Jews to a certain neighborhood, of course driving the affluent Jews back to the original Jewish neighborhood, as Serafim had explained. And therefore we have in Piotrków and Brunalski, and then we have afterwards some in the Wartheland, in this part which was annexed to Germany. And then we get the establishment of the ghetto in Lodz, Litzmannstadt in the German terminology. Now that is an interesting case because that is actually the first closed ghetto. And that has to do, this happens in April 1940, which is 8 months after the occupation of Poland, so not immediately. And there was already a Jewish elder there from the very beginning, already from September. There is a first commander and then the second one, who is much more known. Gumkowski is officially appointed in October. But there is a Jewish council, so we can see that Jewish councils and ghettos do not overlap. There was a Jewish council, there was no ghetto. The ghetto comes here in 1940 in April, and it's the first time that there's a closed ghetto. And the interesting thing is, and somebody asked me if I'll mention Gumkowski. Gumkowski is the Jewish elder of the Lodz ghetto. He was he's a very controversial person, but he was a strong bureaucrat, let's say, and he organized a well-functioning ghetto in cooperation with the German commander. And there is a document from the German legal department in Lodz, where they summarize the 3 years of activities in Lodz, and where I say that this ghetto in Lodz becomes a model, and there are pilgrimages of German bureaucrats from other places to Lodz to see how a good ghetto functions, and well-organized ghetto functions. So Lodz becomes a model, and even later on there is a discussion in the government, of the general government, about Warsaw, about a year later, where one of the participating persons says, if you had done in Warsaw the same that they did in Lodz, right, then it would have been different, right? It would have been better functioning. So Lodz becomes a model. Now, what we can see in Warsaw is that it takes more than a year to establish a ghetto. The idea, this is an announcement or a board in the street in Warsaw in the summer of 1940, before before the ghetto was established, already announcing to the Germans, to German soldiers and so on, that this is a dangerous area because there are epidemics, the danger of epidemics, right? Yeah, here typhus, yeah, typhus, but in general it's epidemic. So they are relating to the Jewish ghetto as a dangerous place. Here you have something from Amsterdam where there was no ghetto, but there are only signs of a Jewish street. And then in 1941, with the invasion of the Soviet Union, there is the question, will there be ghettos there? Now what you can see is from already early stage, the invasion is on the 22nd of June 1941, and of General Karl von Rockes, who says in one order, ghettos should be installed in places where Jews are a large portion of the population, especially in the cities, when they're established as a need, or at least when it serves the goals. But several days later, in no situation is the establishment of ghettos to be seen as urgent. So it's again up to the local commander to do it. Now we know that there were some 500 ghettos in the occupied Soviet Union in the end. Not everywhere, but now, of course, we are already in the stage of the final solution in 1941. In Poland in 1939, it was not part of the final solution. It was an encounter with the local Eastern European dangerous Jews, right? As in a reaction, an anti-Semitic perception of the Eastern European Jew as being dangerous, a reaction by local commanders, not upon orders from above as such, but it becomes a tool. And now with the invasion of the Soviet Union, the commander here says, well, I'm in favor, it can be done, but it is not urgent. It is not urgent. And in fact, what we see is that there are places such as in eastern Galicia, which now belongs to Ukraine, right, where a lot of Jewish councils are established shortly after the invasion, but no ghettos, only later on. For instance, in Lviv, Lemberg, where in October 21, the commander, local commander Karl said, it is unthinkable that in Lemberg the Jews should be treated differently than in Krakow and Warsaw, where there are ghettos. Therefore, in the forthcoming year, the Jews will be contained together in Jewish quarters, right? And removed from the streets in Lemberg too. So you see again the copying, right? And he said it's unthinkable. There are ghettos, and here in my domain there is no ghetto. There should be a ghetto also. Jews should be contained, right? So we again see it developing. And then in Romania, in Transnistria, this is also copied. But what you can see, and that is very interesting, that in the order which relates to that, the Jews will dwell in ghettos, colonies, labor camps. So in this decree, actually, there's no explanation. Ghettos, labor camps, it's all the same. And we even have a letter of a husband, a non-Jewish husband married to a Jewish wife, and the wife was sent to Transnistria, and he visits her, which was possible there, and then he writes about the camp, ghetto, among quotation marks. So he calls the camp a ghetto. So you can see that the term is used in all kinds of ways. Then the term ghetto is used for Theresienstadt, right, which is established in the protectorate of Bohemia, Moravia, the Czech Republic of today, right, as a concentration and transition center. And you see the term also when Dieter Wisliceni deports the Jews from Salonika in 1943, where the concentration centers of the Jews in the process of deportations are called ghettos. And the interesting thing is that not only in the German documentation, but also in the reporting of the Italian consul from Salonika to Italy, he writes about the ghetto. So you see the term originating from Italy now coming back after several hundred years through Salonika to the Italian discourse also. So if we now want to conclude and leave some time also for a question and discussion, so what we can see here that the ghettos were, there was no bureaucratic planning and logic which caused the emergence of the ghettos. It originates from the existence of Jewish neighborhoods in the past and the perceptions regarding them, now interpreted also in a new way by a Nazi academic. Right? But, and here it is, I think, very important to quote, and I promised also to mention Bratislava, not only Venice, right, to somebody, that Dieter Wisliceni, who was belonged to the Eichmann department and was his emissary in Slovakia, and afterwards he was in Salonika with the deportations of the Salonican Jews, and in Hungary in 1944, a very interesting person, a bit lazy, but also liked to talk to a lot of people, and it has repercussions for one of those memories. But he says in a very interesting testimony that he wrote down when he was awaiting his trial in Bratislava, in a cell in November 1946. He testified in the Nuremberg trial several times, and also on other occasions, but he has a very long written testimony when he was asked about his doings in Slovakia and other places, and he gives an introduction, which he was not asked for to do. He gives an introduction saying, you cannot understand what we did without understanding the atmosphere. And then he gives, well, he was not asked about it. That's so amazing. And then he said, anti-Semitism was one of the main fundamentals of Nazism's program. It resulted in fact from two views: the pseudo-scientific biological statements of Professor Winter, that is also an academic who dealt with race and so on, and Jews, and from the mystical religious perception that the world is dominated by good and evil forces, or forces of good and evil. The evil principle is, according to this perception, personified by the Jews, whose supporting organizations are the church, or Freemasonry and Bolshevism. This world of perceptions is impossible to grasp in terms of logical reason. It is a form of religiosity which leads to sectarianism. Millions of people believe on the influence of this literature in things, something which can be compared only to similar medieval phenomena, such as the witch mania. So, Hexenwahn in German. So what did he do with the Hexen, with the witches in the... Burned them, right? So, that is to exercise the spirit. And that is what say, that was our mission. That is what the atmosphere we live in. And I'll come back to this in the afternoon, and so on. Now this is very important because this explains the reaction. So the anti-Semitism is a driving force also for local commanders, right? Because they could have dealt with Jews in different places, even according to the official orders, only through Jewish councils. Right? Ghettoization as such was not needed. But here comes something which expresses a feeling, right, of disgust and the need to separate, right? And this brings us to another thing that none of the scholars in the past have dealt with, that most of these ghettos were established within the center of the cities, where it disturbed the urban life. We have in 1940 in Warsaw and 1941 in Amsterdam exchange between the city authorities and the German commanders, right, German bureaucrats, said it will ruin the tissue of urban life if you leave the Jews there. If you want to separate them, do it in the suburbs, right? Not in the center of the city. Now you know these pictures also from Warsaw with the tramway going in between and the bridge above it and so on, because it was from the urban perspective idiotic. It had no logic in it. If you want to separate the Jews, okay, to other places, but not in the center of the city. So, but if we understand it in this perspective, we can see it. And what we also see is there was no typical ghetto. And it didn't serve the road to the final solution as such. We have the ghettos in 1939, 1941, which were not everywhere. As I said, there were some tenth of places, but not everywhere. Right? It was a local decision. It did not serve an overall policy as such. And Hitler is not involved in it also. So we have to talk about ghettos and not ghetto as one form. And Judenrechte and ghettos are different issues. Judenrechte, I can give a separate lecture on that, how that emerged. That was an administrative concept which starts in the 1930s already. But ghettos, in the mid-1930s, but ghettos is another issue. They overlap partially, but they are not originating from the same place. Now, we can also understand that ghettos were only in Eastern Europe, and Theresienstadt and Salonika, but not in Central Europe and Western Europe. Right? There were concentration centers in Western Europe during the final solution, but not ghettos as such. So it's a different phenomenon. And but when they emerged, there was an escalation in anti-Jewish policies originating on the local level and not as such as an order from above. Okay? And this raises another question which is very important for Holocaust historiography in general, that is that you have several layers of anti-Jewish activities. Right? There are certain developments which led to the final solution, but according to my explanation, the ghettos were not a step towards the final solution. So the final solution was carried out without ghettos in places where there were no ghettos. For places where there were ghettos, they were used. And there are even places in the Soviet Union where it was used as a tool to fool the Jews. Right? We have ghettos for several days only. The Jews are called to concentrate in a ghetto because all around killings are taking place. And they said, well, in the ghetto there will be a secure situation. That's, for instance, the case in Rostov on the Don. And Jews come and at a certain date to the place where a ghetto will be established, and then they are taken to a murder site. Right? So it is used also by the Nazis in order to fool the Jews. So what does it now, this whole understanding leads us to, which is relevant to the issue of anti-Semitism in general. The issue is that we can see in the Nazi period ideology. There is a certain overall framework, but there are a lot of developments which originate from images, traditional images, and local reactions by people who have now the power to act, commanders in occupied territories and so on. So we see phenomena which express anti-Semitic feelings, anti-Semitic traditions, but are not part of what many scholars were looking for, the path to the final solution. The path to the final solution and the decision on the final solution are strategic decisions which are made on another level. So we have several layers of anti-Semitic action in the Holocaust period, which shows us that in a certain atmosphere where there is a legitimation for anti-Semitic activities, all kinds of anti-Semitic traditions can flourish. And I think this is important when we think also on later developments, post-1945, right? That when there is an overall atmosphere which said, well, you can express yourself and your personal feelings on this, then it liberates these ideas, right? And therefore, even if there is no anti-Semitic policy as such, but the atmosphere is supporting and encouraging, then you can find these other paths of older traditions of anti-Semitism now coming or implementing or suggesting new actions against the Jews. And here I'll stop. And we still have quite some time for questions.
The third point of the conclusion.
It's another third point. Okay, that's a quote from Hitler. But I don't want just, yeah? This is from his first political writing in 1919. So what I want to say is, we have the Hitler statement, that is what he called the große Linie, that is the big line or the overall line of policy. But there is also the local one, which is not a policy and not directed by directors from above. So we have these different graders. That is the difference which I wanted to show. Okay, yeah, now fire.
To what extent do you find that Serafim's ideas were not his own, but actually came from Polish circles?
Well, I would say that, that is what we find in academic research in the humanities. So on the one hand, there is the collection of data and thinking about it, but we live also in a context. Right? So in the case of Serafim, I think most of the ideas that he got are from Polish Jewish academics, then interpreting it in a different way. I don't think it's so much from Polish scholars, right? It is different with, if you allude to the Madagascar project, right? There you have something which was also already proposed in Polish circles earlier, and it's taken over. But in this case, I don't see an influence of Polish, let's say, anti-Semitic scholars in the 1930s.
Just as a general discussion of some sort? Because you had it in your book and that reference was kind of left hanging.
No, not on this issue.
No, not on scholars, no, but you say specifically that Sarafim's ideas were not his own, they came from Polish Jewish.
Polish Jewish.
So you have two groups, you have Polish and Polish Jewish.
Yes, that's
In
what I wrote.
your book,
So
it's
maybe
54.
I don't remember. I have to check it.
54 in that book right there.
Okay, I'll check it afterward. but not as. So I have to check myself. But let's say most of it, if you look in the bibliography of the book, right, and it's very interesting because it's you have Arthur Rukin and Balaban and Engelblum, and these are all Jewish scholars, right? So it might be, maybe when I wrote the book, I looked the bibliographies, there were some Polish scholars, but it's mainly the Polish Jewish scholars that he bases himself on.
Thank you very much for your presentation and the insight that you gave. With your permission, I wanted to suggest something to the group as a whole, based on what you said, to discuss. You know, the question about whether something is a step on the way to something or a happenstance that is part of a larger process bedevils all history. It's just part of history writing, so you can't settle that. But what we see in what the professor is also pointing out here is that there's something else going on with the emptying out of the meaning of words. There was one point where the word ghetto meant something that wasn't nice. I mean, it was oppressive, but it had a limited meaning. It didn't have the completely sinister meaning of step or destruction. It could be, as you said at the end, and that's what struck my mind that they were doing, that this was just another attempt of their malevolent trickery to call something a ghetto where you got a sense of reassurance, we'll be locked up, but nothing worse will happen to us there. Or it could be what also struck my mind when I was thinking about it, relevant for all of our anti-Semitic discussion. I'm thinking back of Thucydides, words lose their meaning. That in anti-Semitism in general, there's always going to be this slippage of meanings and words, and what can start out just meaning something bad but limited, like Jews are unwelcome, or whatever it is, or something like that. Then like a bicycle gear, you know, getting lower and lower and lower, and that almost like we can discuss it maybe as a theory. Anti-Semitism always entails the collapse of meanings of words.
But in the context we're describing, you had a thing called Rasenkunde and a number of other areas of research that are going on, which would suggest that in as much as the Jews are part of this bigger picture of the development of ethnic studies, that it's only one of many. So I just fear sometimes that we get too focused in on just saying and thinking that the Germans are looking only at Jews and identifying only Jews, even if they're the ultimate consequence of Nazi policy. And I thought kind of following maybe.
Well, the Serafim wretched person.
Well, I'm agreeing with you, but what I'm saying is that the idea of individual ethnic groups as identifiable groups in different ways is part of German academic work in the late 19th century and moving onwards. And they're looking at the world in those sort of racial ethnic terms. So the notion of talking about a ghetto fits in with the academic trends of the time to say that they want to understand what the inherent nature is of the individual races of Europe.
Well, we could discuss more about that, the university professors have played an unbelievably bad role in modern history in general, like defining things in such a way that allow for all kinds of people. The Serafim he's one example of thousands of people who allowed for people to have some kind of sense that this is a scientific neutral process or whatever you want to talk about it, which is one gear slipping further, and then you can take his word and slip it a little lower when it gets, by slipping lower, I mean doing more brutal things. Of course, you know, when it gets into the bureaucratic nature. And then the commander on the ground says, well, okay, that just means starving them. And then on it goes from there. And if you want to say it starts with professors, I completely disagree. I mean, you showed it yourself.
But another point that I wanted to raise, indeed, one of the findings, I think, and it's important, is that the semantics of terms. We have a term and we think that we know what it means, but the semantics change over time, right? So, and they are used in different ways. Another very important thing in the field of the Holocaust is, of course, Vernichtung, it's annihilation. Right? It is used in the 1930s. You have even a very famous Jabotinsky speech in 1935 when he established the New Zionist organization. And he said, what is happening now in Germany is Vernichtung. He didn't talk in German, but the official publication of the New Zionist organization was in German. So his speech was translated. So it is in German that he uses in 1935, said what happens in Germany now is annihilation, right? But there is no final solution. So annihilation 1935 is the destruction of the economic basis for Jews to live in Germany. That's how we understand. But in 1941, annihilation means something different. Right? So the changing of the semantics and the load of the meaning of words is very important in the context of history. And if you now are criticizing academics, a lot of historians are forgetting it. Not only historians, but also others. That you think that you know what somebody says, but at the time it has another meaning. Right? And I think this is very, very important. So you can use certain terms and infuse it with a new meaning in different situations. Yeah.
I'm going to say back what I thought you heard. When you began, you talked about ghettos and concentration camp, and I got the impression that you wanted us to understand that they were one and the same, or maybe an evolution. So I was kind of viewing it as this Jewish experience were these external forces forcing them in. And then in the contemporary American experience, in how Americans use ghetto now, it seems to be like internal forces that keep the people in more excellent. Were there internal notions that kept people in those ghettos? So like when I say internal notions in American, the substandard school system, lack of fresh food in the grocery store, jobs that are far out that the people can't get to, and even this notion of what used to be public housing that was developed by the government to keep people contained in a certain space. So I'm looking at those variables as like these internal variables within the ghetto. But when I listen to you, I'm picturing that there's this external pressure to push them in.
Okay. So actually there are a lot of questions and I'm trying to relate to them. First of all, what I said in the beginning that there, and I quoted Hilbert, concentration centers is not the same as concentration camps. Concentration camps is another issue. There is now an excellent book just published a year ago by a British scholar, Nicholas Waxman. It's called KL, and it is about the history of concentration camps, which is a general development, not, at least not in the beginning, it did not have to do with anti-Jewish policies, but with, of course, persecution of all kinds of enemies of the regime. So concentration camps and concentration centers in the meaning of Hilberg and as I used are different things. Now, having raised that, the interesting thing is that next to the Yad Vashem Encyclopedia of Ghettos, there is an encyclopedia which was compiled by the Washington Museum, and it's called Encyclopedia of Ghettos and Camps. Right? So they put together the ghettos with the camps, and therefore you have now two encyclopedias arguing with each other about what ghettos are. And I think ghettos do not belong to the domain of concentration camps. It's a different phenomenon, different origins, and also with different aims, let's say. Now, you spoke about external and internal forces, about how the Jews concentrated. We talked about it already before during the break with somebody else, that you have, of course, already the phenomenon of Jewish neighborhoods in the Middle Ages, right? Which begin with Jewish internal forces, because in the Middle Ages you have everybody was believed to be religious, right? And there are religious needs, and in Jewish religious life there is the community, so there is the synagogue, the need for the minyan, for 10 males together for, in order to be able to have the prayer in a certain way. So, and there is the ritual bath, and there is ritual food, and so on. So, because of these needs, Jews cling together in certain neighborhoods. In the Middle Ages, these were little neighborhoods, but you have that is an internal force. Right? But already in the Middle Ages, we have also, since the Fourth Lateran Council of the Catholic Church in 1215, that there is also an external order to separate the Jews in certain neighborhoods. So it is an interaction. Now, again, when you look upon the migration of the term ghetto, the term itself is interesting, because when Jews emigrate since the end of the 9th century to the United States, you have again that Jews are looking for each other to live together, also for religious purposes, but because there's already, of course, a very advanced secularization process, also because of other reasons, because migrants, they want to be together with people from the same country and so on. So now you have already at the end of the 1920s a very interesting book by a sociologist, Wirth, W-I-R-T-H, who writes about the Jewish ghetto of Chicago, right? And that is the Jews, because of their own reasons, getting together or living together in Chicago in a certain neighborhood, mostly the poor Jews there, and from there also the term enters sociology. So therefore you get later on black ghettos and Hispanic ghettos and so on, which is now used throughout. So these are different aspects of your question. There are internal and external forces, but there's also the migration and the change of the semantics of the term itself. And when you talk about what is happening later on, that is, and then you go back to the metaphoric use of the term ghetto, right? It's not only living together, but when you said, well, we want to keep our traditions through the educational system and so on, then it is a metaphoric ghettoization, but not in the way, I would say, that they separate themselves entirely from general life, but within a, let's say, multicultural society, where said we want to keep our tradition. So it is to a certain degree, you can call it a ghettoization or keeping the tradition. Okay, what's that?
I assume that you will be against classification of the different ghettos, but I would like to, my question I would like to based on the Lithuanian case, and I assume that you know that the Lithuanians try to classify ghettos in the two types. So the big ghettos, as Vilnius, Kaunas, and the Šiauliai, and the small ghettos, it was some, from your lecture, I know that it's concentration centers in reality. It is for the small, for the short time concentration of the Jews in the Stadtels, for example, in the synagogue, around the synagogue, in the one street, and so on. And this short time ghettos, which was established in the province, there was not long, it was short time ghettos, the Lithuanians call the small ghettos. So we have some definition in the history of it. What do you think? I think that we should change this approach, and maybe it is useful for Poland too, with this small, not long duration ghettos. Concentration centers. It's not, it was a place when the Jews were concentrated and killed.
I find that less. Yeah, well, I find that is less essential, right? So big and small is an issue of size. And what I try to show is that at a certain moment, ghettos are also used in the process of the final solution. But historically, they are not the step leading towards, as it was perceived in past historiography, right? Either intentional or functional, let's say. This Michael Alberti says, well, they were not intended to be, but they were, when you look backwards, right? Because they were concentration centers, and when there was a decision on the final solution, then they could be immediately used for that purpose, right? So, even if not intended, they were. And what I claim they were, if you take the overall picture, for most of the places they were not, because the final solution was carried out also without ghettos. But there were certain situations where they were used. Now, especially, that is the case, or quite clearly that's the case in Hungary in 1944. In Hungary in 1944, of course, there is some discourse about the ghettos in 1943, before the German invasion. But after the German invasion, the ghettos are actually identical with concentration centers, right? Because they are established at the outskirts of villages. Very interestingly, in many cases, in factories for bricks, right? Because that was there were a lot of such factories in Hungary, and they are recycled for this purpose. But here it's part of the final solution. Although the Budapest ghetto is not, because the Budapest ghetto becomes actually a ghetto when the deportations are halted, right? So you can see it is used in different ways, and therefore, and many of these ghettos in Hungary in 1944, they exist for 4 or 6 weeks, right? And many of them are small, right? But they are for the same purpose as bigger ghettos. So it is hard to classify. My claim is that they are used in different situations for different purposes, right? And the term by the Nazis themselves is fluctuating. Now, an example: the ghetto in the two ghettos in Salonika in 1943 and the ghettos in Hungary in 1944 are called ghettos. But in Western Europe, you have places which have the same function exactly. Right? That is Westerbork, Mechelen, and Drancy in Westerbork in the Netherlands, and Mechelen in Belgium, and Drancy in France, which are transit camps. Actually, Salonika, the ghettos, are transit camps, right? So you have the same function. It is also, people are brought to these places at a certain moment for a very short period, but the names are different in the German vocabulary. So you can see it is not systematic, right? We are getting back to academics. We try to classify, to put in boxes and say, it's so, right? Then we have ordered the world for ourselves, but the world is not so orderly. Yes?
Yeah, this hopefully is not a stupid question, although I feel it might be. But if the ghettoization wasn't systematic and happened sort of piecemeal, as it were, in responses and copying, yes, is the gist of your presentation. But the final solution was systematic. It did have a directive, and the camps weren't just people copying other people, but they were all sort of implemented as part of the directive.
Well, first of all, it's not a stupid question, but even stupid questions are important always. Yeah? Because we always think that we know something, and when somebody really, my students, when they're asked stupid questions, these are the best questions. Because then I start to think how to relate to them. So, but even regarding the final solution, we know today, right? And again, post factum, we want to see this orderly planning and so on. And we know now that there are some strategic decisions, right? But they are not clear-cut, right? We assume today that there was a Hitler directive, let's say, decision in mid-July 1941. And Browning, I quoted Browning, he said, we don't know, there is no protocol, there is nothing, but things happen afterwards, right? So we know that most of the killings during the first weeks of the invasion of the Soviet Union were of males and not of women and children. But from the second week of August 1941, we suddenly see in the reports of the Einsatzgruppe killings of women and children. Right? So something happened, right? Something happened. And the question is what? So Christopher Browning says, if you want to know what Hitler said, look at what Himmler is doing after meeting Hitler, right? And Himmler goes around in Eastern Europe, and we see some things happen. But again, what we see here is that things start at certain places, right? So we see massive, comprehensive killings, including women and children, in August 1941. Then the big massacre at Babi Yar at the end of September 1941, and it is broadening. The circle is broadening, right? And modes of action are developed. It's like throwing a stone into a pool, right? And you see the circles broadening, right? And then later on you get a planning, a more systematic planning. So it's not beforehand, but it is, there's an expression in Hebrew, while you are walking, right? Then you are systematically building up the program. And that is what actually happens with the final solution. So there is an idea, there is a directive, there is a mission, which is vague, and Hitler doesn't know exactly how. But now he said, now is the apocalyptic war against the Judeo-Bolshevist world. Right? So go ahead, and then you have the others trying to find a way, and then first killing center in Chalmla is planned in September, and so it builds up, and in 1942 you get a more systematic programming, which then encompasses the whole of Europe. So again, it is something, but here you have this control from above, and Hitler is strategically interested in.
So I think one just so one clearly, so rightfully I'm always doing, I'm interrupting. I think we gotta go.
Continue at 2:30.